I'll try and keep to time today. So I'm Michelle Carter. I'm Head of Transport at the Knowledge Transfer Network. So we are, if you don't know, UK's innovation network. We are partly funded by Innovate UK. And our role is to connect people. We support businesses. We're very much business facing and helping businesses to innovate and grow by helping them find the resources and expertise that they need to do so. And Kelvin will talk about that in his introductory presentation a bit later on. So in terms of the housekeeping, there's no fire alarms expected today. So if they do go off, I believe we just head out that door there and the staff will take care of us from there and take us to the appropriate locations. So fingers crossed that doesn't happen today. Refreshments, well, you've probably all found those already outside, that's fine. And the toilets are just through the door and to the right. So in terms of today is a competition briefing event. There's actually 2 competitions that are being launched today. And hopefully this will be the last time, only time I'm going to have to say them both in one go, because they are SBRI competitions for innovation in automated survey processing for railway structure gauging and innovation in railway platform end and edge technology. So you will start off in this room today, just for a bit of introductory contextual information, and then you'll split off into the relevant sessions and the relevant competition that you'll be interested in. So if you are interested in railway structure gauging, let's say, you will be in this room. And if you're interested in railway platform end and edge technology, you'll be in the room next door, which is Enterprise 2. So also, we are being recorded today, so a very warm welcome to those of you that are joining online. If you have any questions, Rob's looking after you this morning. Please type them into the chat box and we can address those for you. So I think we will kick off the morning with an introduction from Innovate UK and then Network Rail. So I'm just going to invite Kelvin to the stage, Kelvin Davies from Innovate UK, to give you an overview of Innovate UK.
Thanks, Michelle. First thing to say, thank you very much to everyone for coming along. It's always rewarding. We throw the invitation out there into the ether. We never know what sort of audience we might get, and it's always a really rewarding experience to find a good number of people interested in these competitions, particularly because these competitions are quite niche, quite specialist, but they have the huge advantage is that there's a real customer out there in the world in the form of Network Rail who really wants these solutions solved, demonstrated, and ultimately delivered. So I'm going to quickly give you an introduction to Innovate UK. The reason I do that, many of you, I am aware, may already be familiar with Innovate UK, but our outreach is such that we always like new people to come along, new SMEs, new organisations to get involved in our competitions. So if you're new to us, welcome. This is a brief introduction to why we exist and what we do. So we have existed for 12 years in the form of Innovate UK, and our function is to derive UK productivity. So we're a government-affiliated organisation. We get a core grant each year to deliver innovation competitions and to deliver the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. Our strapline, if you like, is Fund and Connect. People often come to these briefings with a very focused view that it's all about funding, but actually the reason we hold briefings like this is as much to do with the connect. We want organisations to access our funding, but through doing so, to get new collaborations, new synergies, new opportunities to work together within industry. So Funding and Connect is a nice summary of what we do. In terms of our summary slide, we have invested since our conception 2.5 billion on behalf of the UK government. A lot of match funding comes in, so this is a 100% funded competition, so no match funding is required, but we also gear matched funding, returning roughly 18 billion to the economy, and our rough order of magnitude return on investment is £6 to £7 for every £1 invested. Funded 11,000 projects. Today, there are probably 2,000 or 3,000 projects on the go, which, if you think about it, there's something like 10 progress meetings happening today around the country. So it's a fairly intense organisation in relation to delivering projects. 8,500 organisations supported, and 9 jobs in each organisation has been created as a result of our support, and a total of 70,000 jobs. So the UK's Innovation Agency, we're most closely affiliated with the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and our home now is in sunny Swindon, alongside the rest of the research councils. Carla's shaking her head. And alongside the rest of the research councils within the UKRI organisation. We also support a number of catapult centres. If you're not familiar with the catapults, they're a great vehicle for bringing ideas to the market. So catapults will bring together academia and industry and SMEs to deliver new innovative projects and new innovative capability on behalf of the nation. I've only met one catapult representative this morning, which is Neil from the National Composite Centre, and I'm looking for Neil's hat. There we go. Oh, there's a few. Very good. So there are a number of reps from catapults here today. Please take the chance to speak to them and to find out how a catapult might help you. And there are a number of catapults which are listed on the slide here. As Michelle mentions, Michelle, thank you very much to you and your team for organising this event today. Michelle and the team do all the hard work, and we're very lucky to stand on the stage and to take a certain amount of the glory. But Michelle's team, as well as organising briefing events such as this, are a facilitator for bringing organisations together. So if you need help in forming a consortium, in finding a market for your product, or to find funding, speak to Michelle and her colleagues in the room. So there's also a number of colleagues from the KTN on the desk outside, and Rob is handling the questions at the back. If you're interested in this funding stream from Network Rail, that's terrific. If you find that you have a more general interest in understanding a bit more about what Innovate UK can do for your organisation, here's a quick summary. We list all of our competitions in a single web place, which is listed there. A quick summary of the highlights. We run a Smart Grants open competition, which is a rolling programme on a 3-month cycle. It's always open, and it's roughly £20 million offered each quarter. We also deliver competitions on behalf of the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. I'm not going to dwell on that, but the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund is one of the big government initiatives for bringing new ideas to market and bringing organisations together. Typically, if you come in on a Monday morning and have a look at our website, 2 or 3 new competitions will have opened. So it's a rolling programme, and there'll roughly be 20 or 30 competitions open at any moment in time. So chances are, if you have a look at that, you'll find something of interest to you. And the challenge for you is to keep abreast of what's going on. A good way to do so is to register with the KTN, and they'll send you newsletters and email correspondence about what's happening in the world. We will also list future rail competitions on that website, but you might find other competitions there which are equally relevant. That said, the most important competition in relation to today is the competition we're delivering on behalf of Network Rail. So a summary of how to keep involved is monitor the websites that I've listed there, and these slides will be made available to you afterwards. You can register for ISCF updates using the link that's provided there. And it's also worth registering with the Knowledge Transfer Network, and then you're subscribed to their, is it monthly bulletin, Michelle? There's a newsletter that comes out monthly appraising you of future funding opportunities and current funding opportunities. So as Michelle says, we're here today to support Network Rail. The reason we're doing this, Innovate UK, through its government support, is a major organisation for delivering innovation competitions, and we've got a track record of bringing some really quite dynamic and imaginative ideas to market. Through the existence of that machine, we're very proud and privileged to work with organisations like Network Rail, which are similarly aligned government bodies. So we're all essentially working for the same organisation, which is the UK government. We're very pleased and privileged to deliver these competitions on behalf of Network Rail, as Michelle said, and it's a bit of a tongue twister, focusing on automated survey processing for railway structure gauging and innovation in railway platform end and edge technology. So we'll give a bit more of a briefing about all of those today, but before we do so, Michelle, I think we're going to invite Network Rail to our stage to deliver the key messages. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right. So if I can now invite Charlie and Hugh onto the stage, and they can give an overview on Network Rail and some of the background to their challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello everybody, my name's Hugh Evans. I'm a Programme Manager within Network Rail's R&D department, looking after two research and development programmes. One is Reliable and Sustainable Power, that's mechanical and electrical engineering in railway parlance. The other is Track Maintenance and Plant, of which alternative gauging forms a part. So, Network Rail. I think most people in the room will have heard of Network Rail, good or bad, through the media and through other interactions. As an entity, we own and operate 22,000 miles of track. We're essentially the custodians of the UK rail infrastructure. 30,000 bridges and tunnels and viaducts, signals, level crossings, and lots more assets beside. We also manage 20 major stations, so the majority of the big stations in London that you will have passed through today, plus Birmingham, Leeds, Manchester, and others. 40,000 employees in the UK, but we also have a consulting arm that's doing good business in Australia, the Emirates, Europe, and the USA as we speak. This is R&D in numbers. I'm not going to stand here and read each one out to you, but I think by looking at the screen there, that gives you an idea of the magnitude of the programme that we currently manage. We're funded within Network Rail at 245 million, but we also have a portfolio value of 357 million. And that difference, we look to the wider industry to match fund with us. So we'll work with Highways England, with TfL, with other European railway undertakings as well. 33 of us in the delivery team, and we have 84 projects currently in flight. The key areas of R&D that we focus on are broken down here. We have robotics. What can we do to automate the railway and make what we currently undertake as a manual task simpler, easier, and more efficient? Data, and the gauging work stream that my colleague James will talk about in more detail later very much focuses on this area. Energy, we are one of the UK's biggest energy users. We're very reliant on the grid at the moment. But what can we do to harness renewable energy and take better advantage of that? That's a huge work stream in its own right. Materials and material developments, and also the development of autonomy and artificial intelligence to support the activities that we do. In addition, we have within Network Rail two innovation development centres. These are both real railways with real infrastructure that we can play on, for want of a better term. We provide access to suppliers, to industry, to come onto the railway, test trains, test infrastructure in a live environment that's detached from the operational railway but still represents a railway in its own right. These two are at Tuxford and Melton, both in the East Midlands. Centres of excellence for testing, and as I said, it provides a safe and controlled environment for the sort of activities we want to do. The team itself, you'll see me on the top left there, and the two programmes that I look after. Civils and Sustainability, Janine Fountain, and some of you may have met Janine on other Innovate competitions that have been hosted. Carl Butler-Garnham looking after our future train and communications programme. This is to do with European train control and other things to support that. Charlie Kingdon, who I'll introduce very shortly. And we also now have an Agile Innovations team that's set up. This team has been set up specifically to address some of the very real concerns that our routes and regions have at the moment, where they're looking for tactical solutions and looking for minimum viable products that can be rolled out to the business in the shortest possible time. So that's Network Rail in a nutshell, and R&D. And I'll now hand over to my colleague Charlie to take you through the next stage.
Hi, yes, so I'm Charlie Kingdon. I'm another of the programme managers in the research and development programme in Network Rail. So my programme is the Safety, Security and Operations programme, which encompasses quite a lot of things, and obviously platform end and edge is one of those things. So how can the supply chain engage with the research and development portfolio? On the Network Rail website, there are a number of challenge statements aligned to the various programmes within R&D portfolio. So they detail kind of what the problem is, what the priorities are around that, those problems and some of the details. So if anyone's interested, then they can access that. The links are up there, but if you just Google Network Rail challenge statements, then they're They're easy to find. There's an email address detailed on the website, so and a form that can be filled in to put forward expressions of interest, which then there's a process where that gets followed through with relevant technical leads and kind of key stakeholders within Network Rail for consideration. So that's one way. There's also a number of innovative procurement models available, ranging from single tender actions, innovative partnerships, and then events like today with the small business research initiatives. A lot of what we do is about engagement with the routes. So Network Rail is made up of routes and regions. Those are the guys and the girls on the ground that have these problems that we need to solve. So for every programme within the R&D portfolio, there is route representation and sponsorship. Every project that gets taken forward has a lead route customer, and that's often where the proof of concepts or operational trials will be held. The route representatives sit on the overall R&D board, overseeing the whole of the R&D portfolio, and they contribute a lot to all of the projects and programmes. We work through a number of partners. I won't talk through all of them. The picture on the slide gives you an idea of the number of partners that we work kind of with and through. And essentially, that in a nutshell is Network Rail and R&D. And then that takes me on to talking about the first of the challenges today. So, Platform End and Edge Challenge. So this is, there'll be more detail in later sessions in the day, but just a high-level program manager's perspective, just to set the scene. So the challenge is members of public accessing Network Rail infrastructure largely through walking off the ends or off the edges of platforms. Trespass, not necessarily resulting in fatality, costs Network Rail a huge amount of money, £5 million per 4-week period. It's a huge, huge problem for us. And that's just trespass. If you consider the vandalism and theft cost, that's an additional approximately £1 million per period. Total cost of security incidents is rising significantly over the years. And from 2017 to 19, the data that we currently have shows that 85% of trespass incidents occur within 250 metres of a train station. So our vision with this project will demonstrate the capability of 3 different solutions that we can test the operational readiness and roll out. The solutions need to be suitable and effective in various railway environments. So the different station environments, we might have manned stations, unmanned stations, remote stations, incredibly busy stations. Various platform lengths. We want the solution to provide more accurate figures on the numbers of trespass incidents. So we know that we don't have a full picture of the number of trespass incidents that we have. And the solutions will then provide reports for the station staff and for group security so we can understand the problem more and then learn from it. So why use this competition to solve the problem? As you can see, it's a big problem for us. So this allows for innovations we haven't yet seen. There will be loads of different ways that could be an approach to this, and we don't know the best way. So this encourages collaboration. It's open to companies of all sizes and backgrounds, and it provides us with more diverse options for solving the problem. Obviously, to tackle this, you'd need a knowledge of the railway at a high level, so various platform requirements, how we undertake work, that kind of stuff. You need an understanding of the data collection processes that are in place, and consideration in the change management. So whatever the solution is needs to be suitable for the staff that will need to be able to follow it. So there's lots of technology and suppliers capable of doing the various individual elements of this, but what we really want is to get an integrated system that will work. So we know that previous Innovation UK collaborations have worked. We're really excited to see what will come out at the end of this competition. Okay, I'll hand over to Hugh.
Thank you very much. I'll just introduce the gauging challenge to the room. Gauging is very, very important to Network Rail as an infrastructure owner. And why is that? Well, if you're driving a car down the street and you're met with a fire engine or a lorry coming the other way or an obstruction in the road, you can take evasive action. You can swerve around it, you can ease your way around it and still continue with your journey. A train driver doesn't have that luxury. His train is guided by 2 bits of steel, 4 for 8 3/4 apart for those that are in the industry. So if presented with an obstacle, or it could be a structure or a train coming the other way, we need to make sure that it fits. That sounds horrendous, but it's something that we do right, we get it right, but to get to that point is a very hard-won activity. So the challenges that we've got for gauging as a whole, we need to make sure our trains don't hit structures. We need to make sure our trains don't hit each other. That's fairly important, isn't it? We also need to make sure that our passengers can get on and off trains at platforms with ease and safely. Historically, our approach to gauging has been overly conservative, to the point where decisions are made erring on the side of caution, and in reality, we can probably feed a lot more trains through the network than we currently have restrictions for. Our infrastructure itself, although you'd think it was static, does move over time. Things creep, rails creep, they're long steel sections. The ballast that the rail sits on will also move. The data that we get can be of poor quality. So the vision, and hopefully the reason why at least 50% of you are in this room today, is to improve our ability to process data and harness machine learning and AI technologies to get data that we collect out to those people that need to use it much more quickly and much more efficiently, so that Network Rail as an infrastructure operator has the information it needs when it wants it and when it needs it. That's the challenge. I look forward to working with you later on today.
So we've raced through this session this morning, and now there's opportunity to ask some questions to our panel. But if we can sort of keep the technical scope-related questions for the parallel sessions, that would be good. But if there's anything burning that you want to raise in terms of what's just been discussed this morning, then let me know. And we've already got one question, and just over there. If you could wait for the microphone, and then everybody could hear your question, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes. Charlie, thanks very much for your very interesting talk. It's William Loader from Focus Sensors. I'm really interested to know how many stations you're targeting in your sort of first phase of observations.
So the proposal is that we're looking for 3 different solutions, and those 3 solutions will be trialled at 2 separate stations each. Yes.
Size of market. Sorry. Have you a size of market that you plan to roll it out? Do you mean every station or just the trial stations for this time?
So I think that would be to be determined, but yes.
For this project, we're just looking to do the initial trial. The kind of end result is to have a report of the effectiveness of the solution, and that will be rolled out to across all of the regions across the country. It would then be in the product catalogue, so if a station manager wanted to use that technology, they could easily procure it and put it in. But for this competition, it is just the trial phase.
Okay. You have another one at the back?
Good morning, my name is Lukman. I just want to ask if a company feels they have the capability to apply for the two competitions, is that possible? You could only apply for one?
So no, you can, if a company has different solutions, even for the same competition, you can apply to the same competition twice. Please don't apply more than 2 or 3 times, though. But this is a procurement exercise. If you have a good solution for either of these competitions, you can apply as many times as you want, as long as they're different. There shouldn't be overlap.
Any more questions? Are there any online that we need to address? None online. Okay. Are we okay? Don't know. All right. Well, we'll let you go off for a break early. Go and get a cup of tea, cup of coffee, and a snack, and start your networking. We do have a networking wall, as you'll see outside in the foyer. Please feel free to go and look at that. And if you feel you want to contribute to that, then there's an opportunity to do so. Please go and see Natasha, and she can give you a little form to fill in. But so we'll be back at 11:45. So again, gauging is in here, and end-to-edge technology is in Enterprise 2. All right, this is really trying my... Right, well, thank you, and we'll see you later. Take a seat when you're ready, thank you, and we'll make a start. Right, welcome. So you are in the session for Innovation in Automated Survey Processing for Railway Structure Gauging. If you're interested in railway platform end and edge technology, you are in the wrong room. You need to go next door. So thank you very much for coming back. Hopefully you've had a really useful networking session. It was a bit longer than what we expected, but hopefully you found it useful. Welcome as well to everybody online. We are recorded, so you'll be able to watch this again. We'll be sending it out in an email for you. If you've got any questions online, Kelvin is looking after you, so please feel free to put your questions into the chat box. We will put them to the room, and our panel will answer them for you. So for this competition briefing session, we're going to start with some background to the competition from Network Rail. So I'll be introducing James and Lee on that, and that'll be followed by the competition scope, and Steve will run through that. And then what we'll do is we'll save the questions till the end. So the panel will sit at the front. We'll go around with the roving microphones. So if you could save your questions to the very end, that would be great. However, those of you online, feel free to chat away. That's absolutely fine, and we'll capture those at the end. So I think we'll get things started, and if I can introduce James Sweeney and Lee White. Rob, unfortunately, can't make it today, so Lee's stepping in on behalf of Rob. So over to you. Thank you. There's a clicker if you'd like.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, automated structure gauge processing using point cloud data. It's a bit of a mouthful. Let me see if I can figure it out. This one. Yep. So I'm James Sweeney. I'm a senior engineer from ST in Network Rail, working in the gauging team, and I'm thinking about trying to improve the way we process survey data into gauging data for the track engineering community. So here's an example in Upholland platform. Note Pimble Lane bridge in the background. And here is the same bridge represented in 2D as a series of points. On the left-hand side, you have what's called an SCO file, and that's essentially a small text file containing metadata of this slice of the network and X and Y coordinates of the structure in relation to where the track is. And the NGD is a collection of hundreds of thousands of these particular files, representing all the structures on the network at the moment. So track engineers use these NGD profiles to perform clearance assessments of the relevant vehicles which they are assessing against the structures on the line which they are interested in. There are several problems with the current process. The current surveying regime is difficult to plan, and the existing equipment we use it doesn't capture large parts of the network. In order to capture the parts of the network that the surveying equipment we use, the surveying machinery that we use isn't capturing, we have to carry out manual surveys, which means increased risk to staff and more time on track unnecessarily. The current survey output is laborious to process. Data can take, in some cases, years from collection to processing to manual checking to final distribution in the NGD to engineers via the NGD. The manual processing means large numbers of staff are required to perform extremely repetitive tasks, checking and converting the output to the text files I showed you earlier on. Causes low morale, high turnover of staff, and we have trouble hanging on to the people who are good at it. The existing survey equipment we have is subject to some calibration issues. There's probably one person in the room that knows how to calibrate it, and he's one of the few people in the country that knows how to calibrate it. Our current gauging system is a bespoke solution which has served us extremely well historically, but the skills required to maintain it are becoming increasingly sparse as it gets older. It has been difficult to find replacement engineers that specialise in the maintenance of the structure gauging equipment that we've got at the moment, as the maintenance of such specific technologies requires expertise which has been over time lost to retirement and people moving on. So, what is the solution? We have opportunities with new data sources such as point clouds. They're very fast to deploy. We can attach them to a train in about 15 minutes. So 15 minutes to attach to a train prior to survey of required route. It is better coverage. We have the option of covering the whole network, so there's less time on track for the technical staff to manually survey missing structures. It's very accurate equipment. There's a higher density of points surveyed than the existing structure gauging solutions that are generally used. There is a faster turnaround between survey collection and distribution to the industry. The point cloud data is reusable across the industry. There's countless other applications of the survey data. And this will allow faster introduction of new vehicles to the network due to increased survey reliability. This means increased safety for passenger and freight due to the supply of more timely data to the maintainer. More frequent surveying enabled by automated processing will eventually enable accurate assessment of the movement of track structures relative to structures in a way that's not currently feasible with existing technology. And having more accurate records of the rate and direction of the movement of track relative to structures will facilitate the prediction and prevention of foul clearances with much greater precision than is currently the case. So, in summary, we have terabytes of point cloud data being collected and stored all over the network. And some suppliers, we're agnostic about the suppliers that we use in terms of point cloud, but some suppliers have over 50% of the network covered. We are not using this data to its full potential due to its sheer volume and the time required to process it. So we need smarter ways of interrogating the railway point cloud data than we currently have. We want to go from this, which is a survey, to a point cloud, to post-processing, to the NGD, which in some cases at the moment is taking months and years, to collection of a point cloud, post-processing and distributed to the railway industry and others. In summary, we want to move towards automated structure recognition, automated structure classification, automated vegetation recognition, automated conversion of the survey to 2D text files, i.e. SEOs. We want automated updating of the NGD, and this will provide accurate real-time clearance information to track engineers enabling simplified trend analysis, and ultimately enabling a safer railway for passenger and freight. And that's me. Thank you.
No, I think you've covered everything. Okay.
Thank you very much then. Thank you. So we're just going to hand over to Steve Sopp. He's from Innovate UK and he'll run through the scope of the competition. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Is this the... Just familiarise myself with the IT. Good morning, everybody. My name's Steve Sopp. I work for Innovate UK. I sit in our land transport team, but I also support our SBRI competitions across transport sectors. So involved with quite a few at the moment, including with Network Rail, with DFT, and also with Highways England. I'm not going to read directly from all of these slides. There's a lot of repetition here, and we're covering the SBRI process this afternoon as well in more detail. But what I want to do is to pull out some important points that are on these slides to make sure that you're familiar with them. I'm quite passionate about SBRI as an initiative. It's a great way of providing solutions to the public sector and solving public sector challenges and problems. You've heard from James about the challenges Network Rail face around gauging. They're putting that challenge out to you and asking you to come up with innovative solutions that deliver on their challenges. This is an SBRI process, which is effectively a procurement contract for R&D services. So it is different from the grant funding process. It's structured in a way that avoids state aid. It's at fair market rate. It's also 100% funding for the R&D services. It's pre-commercial, so it's helping you get a solution to market that Network Rail can then seek to procure through a separate open exercise. It's great for you. You get paid to do your R&D. It's great for Network Rail because they get solutions to market which they can procure, which solve their needs. There is no solution today on the market that does that. So this is a great way of providing these solutions. Aim of today is really to set out the background of this competition and sort of bring the scope to life. How many of you in the room today have had a chance to look at the competition scope on our Innovation Funding Service platform? Can you put your hands in the air? Great. I'm glad. So you'll all be familiar with that. So I won't need to go into too many details, and hopefully your questions will be solved by going on the site. But I want to draw out a few things that are really important and you ought to be aware of. You're probably aware this is phase one of a two-phase competition. This is a more traditional SBRI competition. Colleagues in the room next door looking at Platform Edge, they're involved in a single-phase competition, which is perhaps a little bit closer to market, looking at getting straight into the sort of development and test. This process involves a feasibility phase, so actually you're applying into the competition, an open competition, open to all organisations, to prove out the feasibility of your idea. Network Rail have set out the challenge, and they've also set out or given you some guidance about what they're looking for in terms of demonstrating the feasibility of your concept, your idea. So there is up to 90k plus VAT for phase one activities. And again, this is a 3-month phase one. At the end of phase one, the successful projects will be entered into a sort of closed competition to see who moves through into phase two, which is 12 months, and significantly more funding available for phase two. There is an assessment process at the end of phase one. We're going to go into a lot more detail around the SBRI process and what that involves this afternoon. So I won't dwell too long on that. Objectives for the project are, as you've heard from James, to solve some of their challenges around gauging and the traditional processes they use. This is about identifying, labelling existing structures, as you've heard, identifying challenges and categorising those structures. And part of your phase one activity will be demonstrating the capability to do that. Again, you've heard from James. These slides will be circulated. I don't want to read from them. You're probably familiar with the objectives of the competition. I'll let you look at some of these slides at your leisure. It's important to say, this is an SBRI contract, effectively, that's going to be issued to you. It's a contract with a single lead partner. So the applicant takes responsibility for delivering. The applicant's name will be on the contract alongside Network Rail. It's a relationship between those two organisations. You may not have the skills or experience in your organisation necessarily to deliver every aspect of this, so you might be looking to collaborate with others and bring in expertise. Now that's normal, that's fine. Those collaborations will be dealt with as far as the contract is concerned as sort of subcontract. So it's you that's responsible for delivering. Encourage you to look at the draft contract to make sure that you're happy with the terms that are in that draft contract. I should have said, for those of you that have looked at the application online, there is a button to press to register your interest in the application and to start the application process. It's dealt with through our traditional FTP site. So once you've registered for the application, you'll be sent a link to a secure site where you can download all the documents. They'll include the invitation for tender, the application form, an FAQ document, and a draft contract. So please make sure you've had a look at the draft contract and are content, familiarise yourself with the terms in there. And there are provisions in there that talk about IPR, so it's really important that you understand what you're signing up to in advance, ideally, of actually committing to this application. Any questions, then do come back to us and through Innovate UK or through your Network Rail contacts. Specific objectives, again, are set out in the competition brief and also on the application. Demonstrate innovations to Network Rail that will enhance the interpretation of point cloud data and providing accurate information on location of features. A two-phase competition. As I mentioned, you're applying into phase one. There's a separate application process. If you're successful and make your way through phase one, you'll be asked to do a sort of closeout report and provide the deliverables for phase one. Your success in progressing through phase one will be assessed, and your application into phase two will also be assessed, and those that are successful will be moved through into phase two. Phase one, 3 months, 90k plus VAT. When you submit your bid, please remember that your bid, your total includes VAT. If you don't submit VAT, we can't add that on later on, so please make sure that those total costs are incorporated in your application. Phase one is, as I said, a feasibility study. Phase two is the sort of development and testing phase. Going to skip through some of these. The competition timeline, the dates are set out on the competition page, but also the kick-off is expected around 1st of May, and phase one should be completed by 31st of July. I don't think there's much flexibility on these dates, so please make sure that you can work to them and that you're ready to go by those dates and looking to complete phase one by that time. There is a short interval, quite a long interval actually, between the end of phase one and phase two. That's so that we can collect the information to give you time to complete your application into phase two and to commission those phase two projects, which is over a 12-month period. Objectives of phase one, again, they're set out in the documentation and online, but again highlighted here. Phase two, please do think about phase two when you're submitting your original application. Clearly the scope and the specification for phase one is clearly set out, and there is a separate process for phase two, but we want you to develop innovative solutions that Network Rail are going to want to procure at the end of this. Think about the whole process when you're compiling your application into phase one. Do think about the full journey. Important to recognise that Network Rail are looking for projects that can be successfully exploited on by the rail industry. So make sure your idea has commercial potential, that it could be exploited, that it will end up ideally in a commercial product that can be procured. They're looking to fund a level of innovation. So these solutions don't readily exist on the market. You must be looking for a sort of step change in what's available today. and Network Rail will be looking for a sort of development phase, a demonstration phase. So do think about how you demonstrate your technology. SBRI, it's a procurement contract, albeit pre-commercial. So generally, SBRI competitions are open to any EU organisation. They're open to any organisation of any size, but it's particularly suited to SMEs. And I think around 60% of applicants into SBRI competitions are typically SMEs. It's really suited to those organisations that are innovative and can react quickly to the challenges of the public sector. You'll be expected to carry out your work in the UK, demonstrating to Network Rail. But as I said, you may be based in the UK, EU or wider EEA. Your organisation can work alone or with other expertise as a sort of consortium, but they will be dealt with as subcontractors. Again, another principle around SBRI, because of its nature, it falls outside of state aid and it also falls outside of the normal procurement rules, but there are certain conditions that we need to accommodate within the contract to make sure it fits within what is considered to be pre-commercial, a pre-commercial exercise. And one of those conditions is that at least 50% of the contract value is directly attributable to R&D services. So there may be requirements for you to purchase capital equipment as part of the project, but the bulk of the costs should be around the R&D service activity. And SBRI doesn't cover commercial development activities. They're not looking for any sort of quantity production or covering costs around commercial viability. This is pre-commercial. Some links on here to some of the Network Rail challenges which sort of underpin the funding route and Network Rail's interest in this particular area. They sit within Network Rail challenge statements. I'm sure many of you are familiar with them, and there are links on this slide pack. Competition dates are on the funding service website, but also just to bear in mind, the registrations do close on the 22nd of January. Please make sure that if you're applying for this, that you're well advanced in good time and that you can submit by the deadline. There are no extensions or excuses. There is an interview process to select the successful applicants that commences on 9th of March, and they are looking to notify successful applicants by the 20th of March with a project start date of 1st of May. Just a summary of the key points that we've discussed. Budget and costs, as you're familiar, 2-phase SBRI, 3 months for the first phase, 12 months for the second phase. We experience at Innovate UK a number of common errors, so we encourage you to pay particular attention to what we consider to be sort of typical application errors, and particularly incomplete applications that are submitted or inappropriate budgets. Please bear in mind this is an application into phase 1. You know the limit for phase 1. Make sure your costs fall within that and that they include VAT. Think about the collaborations. Remember, this is a contract with a lead organisation, so whoever is submitting the application on behalf of an organisation, you are responsible for delivery and you are responsible separately for any collaborations. The legal arrangement is between the contractor and Network Rail. And the final point here, please make sure you submit to the correct competition. There are 2 parallel competitions. If you're applying into both, just make sure you submit the correct application form into the correct competition. This is an interesting slide that effectively shows the rate of submissions as we progress towards the close date, and you'll see a rapid increase as we approach noon on the deadline. This is quite common across all competitions. Please make sure that you're early on in the process when you submit your application. Don't leave it to the last minute. If something happens, you have a power cut, your PC dies, there are no excuses for late submissions, so it must be in by noon on the deadline. Some top tips. Please read the scope documents carefully. Do please look at the draft contract and familiarise yourself with the terms. As I mentioned, This is a draft contract. There may be some alterations to accommodate your specific needs around your application, but the core and key terms in that contract are unlikely to change. So make sure you're happy and comfortable with those. Pay attention to the priority areas. Make sure your project's within scope. Explain how it is innovative, and also think about that route to market. It's really important. What we're looking for here is a solution that Network Rail ultimately want to procure. You're kind of constrained by the scope of the competition and what's in the contract, but there has to be a balance. We expect you to work very closely with Network Rail as you're developing your solution to make sure that it works for them. Again, you're being paid what you've put in your scope, and the scope is clearly set out in the contracts, but there is a lot of value from the close participation by Network Rail. I've got one of my colleagues in the audience who's working very closely with Highways England on a separate competition. I wonder, Carla, whether you can say anything about the importance of the lead customer role.
Innovate UK. Thank you. Sorry, I haven't my back to you guys. But I also am looking after the Highways England competition, so very similar to this type of setup, but for a different customer. And as Steve was saying, really, it's so important that you work with your stakeholders. You're really lucky that I think there's 10 or 12 of them here. So please do talk to them today or after today and make sure that what they're looking for meets what you can offer. Don't try and shoehorn something else in just because you'd really like them to want it. If it doesn't meet their requirements, they're likely not to fund it. So it's really important that you build that relationship with them, and we've seen that firsthand through the Highways England competition. So really do use your stakeholders, especially when they're here today.
Thanks, Carla. That lead customer role is a key part of the SBRI competitions and really valuable both for Network Rail and both for yourselves to help you get to that end point where there is a product that Network Rail want to procure. Just as an aside, I would mention that the Crown Commercial Service have a new innovation marketplace called Spark. If you haven't looked at that or aren't familiar with it, do Google it, do have a look. It's an opportunity for businesses to put their innovative solutions onto a framework where the public sector can then procure it. So it's ideally suited to SBRI type competitions. At the end of this process, if you're successful in phase 1 and successful in phase 2, you have a product that's commercially viable that you can get to market. Please think about registering it on the Spark framework. It offers a route for for Network Rail and for the wider public sector to then procure that directly. A number of you mentioned you've already seen the Innovation Funding Service information. Please do go on if you haven't and have a look at that. That's the link for you to register to apply. You'll get details for a secure site where the competition documents can be found. And any general inquiries about the process, then please feel free to email our Innovate UK support address on the slides. They will get in contact with the relevant technical leads and come back to you on the process. But take advantage of Network Rail today, please, if you've got any questions around the scope. Are there any questions?
Do you want to just take a seat?
Sure.
Steve, and thank you very much. We'll just thank Steve for his presentation. I didn't know if Wayne wanted to join, or are you quite happy there? Hugh. Oh, sorry, Hugh. Wayne's in the other room. I know. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I know, it's confusing. Hugh, thank you. Okay, so we'll have a Q&A session, and we will take some questions online as well. So if there's any from... there are. Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Put the mic on. Oh, so we've got some technology issues. We're just waiting for a functional microphone, and then everybody can hear the question.
Hello? Right, okay. So in the slides it says project work to be carried out in the UK. So we've got a question where you're accepting a bid from an EU organisation. Can they do what can they do in the EU and what has to be done in the UK that needs some clarification?
Hi, yeah. So the expectation is that you'll be demonstrating the technology and working very closely with Network Rail. However, in the background, if there is development work that can be done within the organisation, that doesn't necessarily need to be done in the UK as such. The important bit is that your customer will need you to demonstrate the technology in the UK in the environment that they select. But obviously this is open to EU companies, EU firms. They will have expertise that could be really valuable in helping Network Rail overcome their solutions. And some of the development work could be taken forward within the location of those companies. But again, just bear in mind that the demonstration activity is in the UK.
And a second question on the scope, I guess. So can universities bid?
Again, if they can demonstrate there's a clear route to market, what we want at the end is the potential for a commercial product to be produced where Network Rail have the opportunity to procure that. So if there's a spin out from a university organisation that's set up and well placed to deliver that, then potentially, yes, they're not excluded.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question just here, thank you.
Olivier Ayash from CISIS. I have a question regarding in the scope. It was said that the structures need to be identified and categorised with an accuracy equivalent to a human. Obviously, this is quite important and a key part for using any machine learning or deep learning to understand what that human accuracy is. Is that something that we need to benchmark during the application, or is that something you're able to provide us a number with?
Well, we have a training set at the moment of structure gauging files, of the best part of 1 million of them for covering the network, and we've been collecting those for years. So we have a training set of literally millions of files that you can already use to train your algorithm, and it's essentially if your algorithm can demonstrate that it can identify and classify a structure with the same accuracy as the training set that we already have, then...
So just to clarify, that training set already has the structures labelled?
Yeah, so we have literally millions of files representing structures going back years across the network, and they classify a structure subtype as such as overbridge, footbridge, platform, and what have you. So we would want an algorithm that can successfully recognise a structure, identify a new one, categorise it correctly, locate it in terms of its linear position on the network, and convert the point cloud representation into a compliant text file representation of that structure.
Okay, thank you.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Just behind.
Brendan Oram, Plowman Craven. Just so I'm really clear, for the phase 1 of this this project, is the intention that the supplier will work on data provided by Network Rail, or is it data provided by the supplier?
That depends on how it's approached, because some suppliers, there are several suppliers that are already collecting point cloud data and photogrammetry data, and if they wanted to collect their own data and provide their own solution as part of that as well, that's within their gift to propose. If the proposal is just to analyse existing data, well, Network Rail can procure a sample training set and give it to the deep learning specialist, essentially. So it depends on who the applicant is and how they want to approach it. If they want to do the survey themselves and post-process it, that's viable. I expect some proposals along that line as well.
So we've got a question online. Thank you, Kevin.
So there's two related questions that seem quite technical about the data capture. So one asking about the source of the provided point cloud, whether that's from onboard LiDAR.
So, well, there's several sources of point cloud at the minute. We would be agnostic about the supplier, but it can be on board. It's generally on board or trolley mounted point cloud.
Right, and there's a sort of a second question that's related, asking about the resolution of the data you might be able to provide.
Well, that's a function of the line speed, and there's several factors in terms of the resolution, but I'm probably not the best person to liaise with regarding the precise resolution, but we would have a surveying expert that you could liaise with for further detail regarding the density of the point cloud.
Okay, we've got a flurry of hands, but the gentleman at the front, I think, was first, and then one at the back, and then we'll come to you. All right, thank you.
Sorry, just another question, Olivier from CISIS, to follow up. Would it be possible then to have some sample data that would clarify what we'd be working with?
Yes.
Before the competition close date?
We'll provide it as a sample.
Yeah, definitely before the competition closes, yes.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Before the application?
Well, we need to give you opportunity, don't we? So as soon as possible.
Okay, so I think we've got a question. The gentleman at the back was first, or next, I should say. And then...
Hi, Jay Richards, GIS Bytes. Just one question regarding the data that you're going to release. Will that include the labels, the data labels for the LAZ files? Because we're kind of particularly interested in what those labels look like.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by labels?
So the data's labelled in terms of the structures that the learning algorithms are expected to detect. We're particularly interested in kind of how those labels are structured, what the schema is for those labels.
Well, for me, the most important label is on the output file, which is a 2D text representation of essentially a condensed slice of 5 meters of point cloud, and that will be labelled as East Lane Overbridge or Watford Tunnel or what have you. So, but in terms of labels within the point cloud, I'm agnostic about that. I'm probably not the best person to answer that. For me, the most important thing is that the input is a point cloud or similar, and the output is an instantly generated compliant text file that can be used to perform a clearance analysis. For me, the process itself and the labels of the input is less important than the speed at which we can go from survey to compliant output. That is what the project is really about for me.
Okay, so kind of in addition to the LAZ files, we'll be given the 2D files which have the data of the structures.
Which correspond to it.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, so there were two hands up at the same time here. Is it all right? Okay, thank you.
Hi, it's sorry, that's loud, isn't it? James Dawson from Tharsis. So we're interested in the sort of hardware tech side of things and how you capture this information. That's really where we would come into this sort of concept. I spoke to a few people who proclaim to know what you do currently. I'm just slightly conscious that a lot of the questions and a lot of the information at the moment is focused on the existing data and how you process the existing data. I just want to really clarify that there is an appetite for better, new, innovative solutions around how you capture the data and the technology that will do that.
It's not something I thought about, but the most important thing for me is to be able to quickly generate a compliant, like I say, text file that can be used to perform clearance analysis. Maybe I was presumptuous in assuming that the existing point cloud technologies we have is how we would do it, but I'm not going to be prescriptive about it. The most important thing is that we can essentially instantly go from survey to compliant text file. If you can propose a different way of going about it, by all means, go ahead.
Yeah. I think we just need to be clear, though, and have some boundaries around the scope of the project here. So I think the focus is very much on we collect gauging information as a company. We have various means of doing that. The problem and what we need to fix is our ability to do something with that data we collect and process it.
Yeah.
That's where we're feeling the pain at the moment.
Okay, there's one at the back, Jess. Thank you.
Hi, it's Tim Rothwell from Scantech. I was just wondering that this proposed system is obviously aimed at route planning, route clearance across multiple structures along a route. Is the proposal to apply the same technology on reactive type projects, remedial works, pre-design works in structures, bridges, and so on?
I'm looking for the ideal output for me would be so that we would be able to treat structure gauging surveying the way we treat track geometry surveying. So it's continuous and it's instant. So we essentially have a live picture of the clearances of the structure and the track on the whole network, and we can survey it instead of once every 5 years or 10 years. We can survey it once every 3 months, 6 months, depending on how interested we are in doing it. It's more important for me to have a live picture of the state of the network. Obviously, there will be other use cases in terms of design and as-built and what have you. But for me, the most important thing is essentially what we call the NGD at the minute. I would like the NGD, what we call the NGD at the minute, to essentially be a live picture of what's the state of the
and the NG, that's the national gauging database.
Yes.
Yeah.
I asked the question because a lot of the work we do is reactive. It's for remedial works, scanning before and after ram arch installations or other strengthening in work. Is at what stage would that information be submitted to the NGB? I presume it would be after the design and after the ram arch or whatever's in place.
Well, I mean, ideally, if we're collecting it frequently enough, you would have a picture of what it's like before the work in the NGD, and you're going to be instantly submitting your as-built as soon as you're going to submit your as-built as soon as the work's complete, and the NGD is going to be updated live there and then, essentially. So it's just about more frequent surveying.
Isn't it about drawing a distinction between the railway is an existing asset, it's out there. We need to make sure that the infrastructure is where we believe it to be against the datum. We need to make sure that our trains every day run on the network without hitting each other and hitting structures, as I talked about at the start. I think anything new, if we're doing new works, putting a new bridge portal in or brick arch replacement or something like that, the gauging and the structural clearances are things that have to be done as part of that commissioning into service, don't they? So I think, just to pick up on what James said, the means by which that is done is very much down to each individual contractor and consultant that's working, but it's how we maintain and manage that information as a current output in the future. So there's that distinction, I think, isn't there? What we're looking at is how we have up-to-date information on our asset at our fingertips when we need it.
So the last part of it is that would mean that we'd have to have accurate chainage mileage information to be able to, which is quite difficult to get on a structure by structure basis at the moment.
Okay.
So we would ideally be looking to move towards GPS positioning of structure files in the longer term as well, because accurate GPS location of structure files will protect against changes in track ID and relabeling of ELRs and what have you in the future as well. So yeah, we would definitely be looking to move towards improved linear positioning of the SCOs and GPS positioning of the SCOs as well. That's it. different question.
What's SEO for various people's benefit?
Oh, the text representation of the structure that we looked at in the presentation. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so we've just got one online, and then we'll take a question over there. Thank you.
So a slightly different question, perhaps give James a break for a second. Somebody's asking about business models and whether Network Rail have any restrictions in the future about buying the solution to this as a product, or whether you would buy it as a service?
I think the immediate answer is I don't know, but I would certainly take that one away, and Lee next to me is frantically writing this down. So that's something I think we need to feed back. It's not something I can give an immediate answer to in this room.
Okay, thank you. And one question over there.
Roy Hickman, you mentioned that you wanted the most accurate and up-to-date data. So what's the intended refresh rate?
You get that?
Well, it's going to be a function of how, in much the same way as we survey the track at the minute, it's going to be a function of the fixity of the track. So Cat 5 track that's less likely to move would be surveyed less frequently than low fixity track with a high propensity to move. I mean that's we would have a more have a more intelligent picture of that once we have there is a parallel project as part of the alternative gauging process running at the minute to try and better understand the fixity of the track in terms of how much the track is moving adjacent to each structure. So the frequency at which we survey the track is dependent upon how much and how close the track is to the structure on each line. If that makes sense. It's in the group standards. The frequency with which you survey the track is dependent upon how close the track is to the structure.
Okay, thank you. We've got another question online.
More technical one. So are the length in railway databases and network descriptions in metres or in some other UK measurement units?
Sorry, what was that? I didn't get it.
Are the length measurements in the railway database and the network, is it in metres or is it in some UK version of length?
I think it's decimal miles, isn't it? I'll have to check. It's in imperial as far as I remember. Yeah, it's easy to convert if the question is coming from a continent.
It's in imperial measurements, is it?
Yeah.
We believe so. It always was.
Yeah.
That's the way we've liked to do things around here, haven't we? But I think, as James said, there is a ready conversion. But let's just doubly confirm that what we hold is in imperial as opposed to metric.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Any more questions? And we've got another hand over there.
Hi, Chris Beck from Arab here. Can you just confirm what data is required in the compliant output text file?
So there is a specification for an SEO that will be circulated as part of SEO, SCX or SCP file as we define it for structure, platform or 6 foot. There will be a specification that will be circulated as part of the project. I can provide that later.
Okay.
It's too long to answer.
Right, okay. Thanks, Kevin. Another one online.
Sorry, so last one. So in the slides it talks about technical approach and transitioning from phase 1 to phase 2. Can you say anything about the IP position of any IP generated from phase 1?
I don't really want to get into too much detail about the IPR. Obviously, IPR is quite a complex area. The IPR provisions are set out in the draft contract. In general, for SBRI competitions, the principle is that ownership of the IPR rests with the developer, but the contracting authority, the funding authority, has a royalty-free license to use that. There are obviously slightly different positions depending on the competition and the nature of the competition. Please do look at the draft contract, and if you need to, get independent advice on that. The provisions around how IPR is addressed in this competition are set out clearly in that draft contract. So as soon as you apply, you'll have access to the draft contract. Please read those provisions carefully.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Last chance? Okay. All right. I think we've reached the end of the questions. You'll be relieved to know.
I think it's...
You want to comment?
Yes, sorry, just to butt in. At the risk of ruining James's lunch break, I think he would be more than willing, as we all would, to answer questions on an individual basis as well. Yeah. There might be certain things that are perhaps better in an environment that we can talk perhaps over lunch than perhaps broadcasting A. But what we will need to do, if there's any specific questions get asked, we need to make sure they're shared with everybody here.
Right.
The answers, I mean, to that.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
What I'm trying to say is, I suppose, that there's an opportunity for further discussion after this session now, if it's needed.
Great. Okay, so there you go. There's an offer for you. Go and catch them at lunchtime. Yeah. Which brings... Yeah, there we go. We can let you go for an hour's lunch, and this afternoon we've got a bit of variety. We'll all be back in here. Everybody will be back in here this afternoon after lunch. We've got the applicant briefing talk and the actual SBRI process from Steve and Kelvin. So stick around for that. And then we've got the fun bit, which is the pitch session. And my colleague Rob's going to be taking over this afternoon, which is always fun. And Emily's back for more because she knows how, she'll get a hug at the end of her pitch. So she's looking forward to that. That's hence she's back again. So we've got the pitch session, and then we'll have a quick summary from Hugh and Charlie, and then some more networking, because that's really important, and that's why we slip it in our networking events and competition briefing events, so that you can all talk to each other. And if you don't know anybody, go and talk to them and find out what they do, and go and look at the networking wall as well. I know that's been popular, so if you haven't had a chance, go and look at that, and you'll find some useful information on there on various expertise. So enough from me. Let's go and have some lunch. Thank you very much. We thank our panel.
It's always hard this afternoon session because I hate breaking up the networking and the great networking that was happening next door. It's fabulous, and that's actually what a lot of this is about. But we do need to commence the afternoon session. So what we're going to do this afternoon, for those that haven't quite recently seen the agenda, we're going to have Kelvin and Steve from Innovate UK talk about the SBRI process. And then we're going to have some elevator pitches from organisations that are putting 2-minute pitches into there to show you what their capabilities are, what their technologies are, and perhaps some potential projects they're looking at as well. I'd like to welcome also the webinar, people that are on the webinar. Good afternoon, thank you very much for joining us as well. You'll be here to listen to the SBRI process, and also to be able to ask some questions to both Steve and Kelvin on that process as well. So my colleague is on the chat box already, and if you're on the webinar and you have a question, please put it into the chat box, and my colleague will ask those questions after Kelvin and Steve have been on stage. So without further ado, Kelvin and Steve, would you like to come up, please? Thank you very much. There we go, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob. Afternoon all. So I'll lead this, but Steve is on hand to answer questions to do with SBRI. My role within Innovate UK is to deliver things related to rail innovation programs, and Steve is our local resident expert on SBRI, which is the framework that is being used to deliver this competition. I'm not going to labour the point with this process. The key thing is that these slides will be made available to you afterwards, so they're a reference point for you, but we'll quickly skip through them in case there are any burning questions from the audience, just to clarify how the SBRI process works. And So what we're going to do is give you an overview of SBRI. We'll remind you of all the eligibility criteria for the competition, explain to you how to go through the process of applying into the competition, how to submit your application, and the way forward. And then, if we have time, Rob, we'll take some quick questions before the pitch sessions. So SBRI, we've touched on it this morning. It is a small business research initiative. It is, however, open to all organisations from across Europe, as long as there's a strong commercialisation plan. It is a government initiative designed to help small businesses to deliver against public challenges, as in the case of the Network Rail challenges we've heard about this morning. SBRI summarised here, a structured process enabling the public sector to engage with innovative suppliers. So it's pre-commercial procurement. In this case, it's pre-commercial procurement of demonstrations of innovation on Network Rail stations and infrastructure. The key features are, it's 100% funded, an R&D procurement contract, operating under procurement rules rather than state aid rules. So when you accept your contract, you've got a contract to deliver the demonstration you've talked about in your application. The contract will be with a prime supplier. You're at liberty to engage subcontractors if you need them. We'd encourage you to do that if you have a part solution. We've heard from a number of organisations over lunch that they've got part of the solution, but not all of the solution. There may be other people in this room who have the other part of the jigsaw that you need. Generally, the IP rests with the supplier. There are some specific caveats in relation to this competition because of Network Rail's support of the programme. Please refer to those in the contract as part of creating your application. Eligibility, we've covered this. It's open to all organisations. There's no limit on the size or the type of company. We welcome applications from within the rail sector, but of course, if you're not in the rail sector, that's great. You might have some really good ideas to bring in. Research organisations can apply, but you need to have a commercialisation plan, and the project work and the demonstration activities will happen in the UK. So the stations are going to be in the UK, and we'd expect your progress meetings to be in the UK. Summary of the eligibility, please refer to this when you've completed your application. We've already covered all of that this morning. Except as part of the application form, there are a number of fixed questions on the application form which you should fill out in a good degree of detail, which we'll touch on in a minute. The application process. Here is the structure of the application form. Some of it is obvious, and you must stick to this form. You must not distort it. You can't change the font size. You can't add graphics to the application form, but you can add them to two appendices. Application form summary. This is writing your name on the front of it. Who are you? What's your contact details? And what's your application called? For all applications going for public funding, we like to have a public summary that we can share far and wide, just to explain where public funding is going. So in this question, you should summarise your application. You should provide as much information as you feel comfortable doing so without giving away any of your IPR. Question 5, what's your idea? What's your technology? You can add an appendix to this if you feel it needs illustrating. Technical project summary. Current state of the art and IP. What's your project plan and what's your methodology? Who's your technical team? What expertise do you bring? Why should you have funding? What's so good about your collaboration with the others in your application, if anyone? Application finances. So how are you going to finance the program? Please build in a plan for milestone payments. So when it comes to your program, which is going to last for 16 months in the case of one program and 15.
3 months for phase 1, which is what you'll be doing.
3 months for phase 1. Then please build in, particularly for the 16-month program, your milestone payments. So against what milestones will you expect to have payment during the course of that? And you'll be monitored on a quarterly basis. So your milestone should roughly be every quarter, so every 3 months. Eligible costs are listed there. I won't go through them, but please, when you're creating your application, make sure that all of the costs you're including in your application are costs which are eligible for public funding. Commercial potential. Great demonstration. Will anyone buy it? Explain why it's a good thing for the railways. Explain why Network Rail would like to subsequently purchase this system. And equally, if you think it has overseas market potential, that's good as well. But clearly the primary market for this demonstration exercise is Network Rail. Is it practical to apply to the railway industry? Lots of great ideas that will never see the light of day in the difficult environment that the railway industry is. So it needs to be something which can be tailored to the permissions that will be required to deploy this on the railways. We had some interesting questions in the session earlier about, I'm looking for Neil, can you damage trespassers? And there was a resounding response back from Network Rail, no, the whole objective is to protect the trespassers, not damage them. So it needs to be something which can practically be deployed on the railway. And in particular, if it is deployed on the railway, what benefits will it offer? So clearly here, your objective is to deliver the benefits which Network Rail are looking for against the challenge statements in the scope. And finally, you have to declare that you're entitled to bid for this work on behalf of your organisation. You'd be surprised how many excited technologists go wild and submit applications without the knowledge of their organisation. And very importantly, if you have GDPR considerations for the technology you're deploying, then you need to self-certify that you're GDPR compliant. So the summary of the application is you will download the application form when you register for the competition. You will get a unique applicant number, and that must be the form with which you apply into the competition. You're allowed 2 appendices, which are listed there. And generally, we would encourage all organisations to fill out the entire form and to complete it. Again, we do receive application forms with missing sections. That makes it very difficult for assessors to give you a high score. Assessment, how does this work? So when we receive the applications into this competition, we have a pile of applications. Each of those goes to 5 independent assessors from outside Innovate UK. So you're trying to impress with your application fellow specialists from the railway industry and from outside the railway industry. Each application is assessed by those individuals independently, behind closed doors. You don't know who they are. They will not announce who they are, and that's a key part of the Innovate UK independent assessment process. We will, in the case of these competitions, also invite specialists from Network Rail to be involved, reason being that Network Rail have a clear understanding of what is innovative. If you remember the eligibility requirements, so what has not already been tried on the railway, what is innovative and what is novel to try in this in the space of the 2 competitions we're announcing. What do the assessors look for? Well, there's always a temptation from all applicants, and I hold my hand up. I used to do this when I was an applicant into Innovate UK competitions. The temptation is to think more is more. Often more is not more, often less is more. So please be concise. Please provide the key information that you think the assessors need to know. And critically, answer the exam question. So please do not just regurgitate large amounts of information for information's sake. Read carefully the text at the top of each application question and respond to that. As it says here, provide the right amount of information. Quantify it. If you can add numbers, that's good. Numbers is good. Objective data is good. And we're also looking for teams which are scalable, which can deliver a commercially viable product to Network Rail. So just make sure that the team that you're proposing into this competition has the right skills. For this competition, the assessors will score using the assessor questions listed here. There are 8 of them. There will be different weightings in response to these questions. So each of the 5 assessors will score your application against these criteria here. Again, you'll get a full download of this as part of the debrief pack from this briefing event. You'll receive a set of the slides in a few days' time. A final question for the assessors is a bit of a catch-all. It is, would you recommend this project for funding? And it's a yes-no, it's a gate. We'll be looking for 3 out of the 5 assessors to say yes in response to this question. How to submit your application? Again, I'll not go through this. Loosely, you register for the competition, you download the application form and the associated documents, you fill them out, and you upload them to the Innovate UK site for assessment. The slides summarise this process and give you some user tips on how the system operates, so I don't need to go through them now. First, you register. You download the documents using your unique registration. You will receive a pack of documents which are unique to you as an organisation. Don't change those names, please. Please stick with the naming convention. Innovate UK probably receives 100 applications a day, something like that. That's the rough order of magnitude. So it confuses our system if it's not obvious. Not only who you are, it's also things like which competition this is. So there are a lot of applications coming in every day. Please only use Word. Please don't change anything else, and appendices should be submitted as PDFs. Again, when you've completed your application, you upload it using a similar process to the way you downloaded information, again using your unique login details. Click the upload button, job done, and we'll send you a notification. Moving forward, we then have an intensive period where we send all the applications for assessment. The 5 assessors will do their job. They will provide not only numerical scores against the questions we've asked them, they'll also provide feedback. There's a tendency amongst all applicants to only look at the yes, no, have I got the funding or have I not? But the reason we invest significant public funding in the assessment process itself is to help you as applicants into future competitions. To assess each application costs about £500, so we invest a substantial amount of government funding just in this part of the process. The feedback, if you're successful, you may not look at it at all, but please do. It may help you. And clearly, if you're unsuccessful, that there is useful tips in there for subsequent applications into Innovate UK or other competitions. Things to note, applicants should all fill in the form. It's obvious. Anyone's eligible. We've been asked a couple of times about the VAT issue. So to clarify or to restate this, all the competition budgets as stated are excluding VAT. However, you should apply including VAT. Be very careful when you include VAT not to go outside the eligibility criteria. So if you applied, for instance, for a £200,000 project, then you should actually apply for a £240,000 project, adding the 20% VAT. To assess your eligibility, we will then take the VAT off again and check that you're not below 200,000. So please make sure that you're still within the two bounds, even though you've done some mathematical manipulations to your figures. We should also mention the Spark Dynamic Purchasing System. This is nothing to do with the RSSB Spark system, which is a database of R&D and innovation projects. This is a database of capability, and Steve might say a bit more about this in a minute, a capability for you to help market your innovation and the capability you possess. And finally, as we've mentioned in both of the briefing sessions about the scope, if you have any questions about the application process or the scope or Network Rail requirements, we have a single point of contact for all of that, and it goes into the email address you see here. So support@innovateuk.ukri.org, and we have a service agreement to try to respond to your inquiries within 2 working days, which can keep us quite busy in the busy periods of these competitions. So, but that's the intention. And I'm happy, Rob, if we have time, to take some questions on the application process, if there are any.
Yes, my colleague Simon's got a roving microphone. So for those that are on the online webinar, if you have any questions, please do type them in the chat box as well. My colleague will let me know that there's questions from the online community. But people in the audience, do you have any questions for Steve and Kelvin, please, on the process? There's one down the front.
Olivier Ayash from CISIS. Quick question. There is an interview process. How far in advance are applicants notified that they've made the interview round on average?
Okay, so you'd be relying on me remembering the dates. So the interview process should have been mentioned in the dates slide on the previous.
That's correct. It just wasn't said when we'd been notified before the interview process.
That's a good question. So I think it's towards the end of January. We have the last part of our. No, it's going to be the start of February. If you need to know the answer to that, please email in a question to the helpline. There'll certainly be 2 or 3 weeks in advance, but the reason we've told you now when the interviews are is so that you can potentially block them out with a dotted line, depending on how confident you are of getting through to that stage of the process. It'll be a single day to which you'll have to commit yourself to a 30-minute attendance in Swindon for an interview process. So if you're based in Bristol, that's pretty handy.
Yeah. Do we have any questions online? No. No questions online. Any other questions in the audience here, please, for the team? Thank you very much.
Hi, Kelvin. Could you explain a bit more about what happens during the interview and what preparation may be required?
Okay, so the interview is valid. So the interview will be to a number of the assessors who have already assessed your application form on paper. It is intended to allow them to validate the scores that they've given to you. And typically, if we were going to award 5 projects, for instance, we might interview slightly more than that, maybe 6, maybe 7. The intention is for teams to present a PowerPoint version of their presentation, of their application. The interviewers will then be free to ask questions. So it's a 20-minute presentation with a 10-minute Q&A session. It's an opportunity for the assessors to ask you questions about anything that wasn't immediately clear in your application, and then to review the scores they've already provided on the basis of the responses.
Thank you. Any further questions at all? No? And online?
No, nothing.
No, online at all. Right, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I think one final thing to say to that is that myself at the KTN and my colleagues at the KTN are here to help you with this process as well. So please, please, please do feel free to email myself and my colleagues. I'm Rob Furlong, rob.furlong@ktnuk.org. And I'm more than happy to read through your submissions before you submit it, just to see how it flows, how another pair of eyes read your application. Obviously, that by no means recommends it to be funded. It just means that if you have made any errors or haven't answered the questions, then another pair of eyes can quite often be very, very useful to do that. What we will ask you, though, is please do not give them to us 24 hours in advance, because we can't read them. We like to take a bit of time to read them and understand what you're doing, etc. So even if your submission is only 50% done and you've done the first 5 questions but not the end 5 questions, we're more than happy to read it at that stage for you and give you some comments back. So work with us, talk with us. We're more than happy to help you there. I'd like to say thank you very much to our audience online. This is going to be the end of the webinar. I hope you found it useful and interactive online session as well. And again, please do contact myself or my colleagues and Kelvin at Innovate UK and the helpline if you have any further questions on this competition. But if not, I'd like to say thank you very much to our online audience, and goodbye and have a great weekend.